Here tonight, he was called Dr. Death. Over time, he told me he didn't like that nickname. Dr. George Nichols of Louisville, the Kentucky medical examiner who modernized that office, died on Wednesday at the age of 77. Over my 38 years here at WHAS 11, I spent a lot of time covering this quirky and blunt professional who lived life to the fullest in a profession dedicated to the end of life.
We've never seen a public servant like him, brilliant and made for TV.
Well, it's a question that had, since it was asked, had to be answered. Whether it was positive or negative mattered not to me.
He was CSI before it was a public term. Dr. George Nichols, Kentucky's medical examiner for 20 years, a Louisville native, talking to me here in the 1996 Prophet Report about a poisoning case.
You're not pulling my leg.
I'm not pulling your leg.
You believe that?
I can tell you with reasonable medical certainty that she's female and that she reads Agatha Christie.
Nichols so detailed he actually painted the portrait of the killer's favorite book. But he told me it was the Carrollton bus crash in 1988 that killed 27 people, mostly children, that changed his life, especially 3 months later.
I was standing in my driveway watching a school bus pick up my oldest kid. Interesting.
I covered the Carrollton crash, trying to understand it as a 24-year-old WHAS 11 reporter. Nichols so shaken by the scene, he secretly went to a state trooper's car.
Sat in the front seat, hoped that it was a nightmare, and then began to formulate a game plan as to what to do.
George Nichols led the way for dramatic safety changes on school buses, and in 2022, after a Jefferson County school bus crashed, we talked to him about the outcome that day.
I was ecstatic when I found out that the thing hadn't caught on fire. What we learned from the Carrollton bus crash has been applied, and it's worked.
His life and occupation was death.
Our major story this evening, the story of death and Holocaust at Beverly Hills Supper Club south of Newport in northern Kentucky.
He investigated the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire, the country's first mass shooting at Louisville Standard-Reviewer. But it was the June 1991 exhumation of our country's 12th president, war hero Zachary Taylor, buried in Louisville, that drew national attention. Questions had been raised. Did Zach really die of arsenic poisoning instead?
I must talk about unauthorized entry into my office this morning.
It started with drama, and Nichols delighted in every moment, first accusing a reporter on live, local, and network television of trying to get a scoop. But that story didn't check out, and he later had to apologize.
I'm sorry.
And then another bombshell about a reporter, Nichols showing his acerbic wit.
In terms of the bribery, that was associated with a telephone call from a print media source. Oh, the sharks are turning.
I was there covering the news conference, watching the clock. George purposely holding the air, waiting more than 20 long minutes to spit out his finding.
It is my opinion that President Zachary Taylor was not poisoned by arsenic.
He was also asked what else was found in the coffin.
Numerous strands of hair, of scalp hair and body hair. We're talking about small, intact and partially shredded fingernails.
5 years later, I asked George about that day.
It was a huge pain in the butt.
He finished out his career as a highly paid trial consultant, telling me with typical George Nichols bluntness how he did it.
My goal with every jury that I deal with is to treat them with the proper respect, to use the big expert words, and then to explain to them at the level that a fifth grader could understand.
On a personal note, I learned a lot about my profession as a reporter from George Nichols, and I grew as a young reporter and a human being because of him. He cared the most about families who were being thrust into the worst of times involving horrific news stories. He made sure we were able to do our job with compassion and respect for those families. Louisville lost a true character, wonderful husband, father, and grandfather, but a truly amazing public servant.